Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to France once again for the first time in what feels like a good long while. Now, as I've told you in previous reviews, in my experience, there are some really good French craft beers and breweries out there, but unfortunately, France is one of these countries where the beer doesn't really travel outside of the country all that much. But I've reviewed a good few French beers on the channel over the last few years. Those came namely from La Cave in Paris, which was an awesome beer shop. That shut down about a year ago or so now, unfortunately. I wanted to go there again and do one of my beer shop visit videos, but unfortunately that's going to be impossible now. But I also received a box of beer from my friend Gauthier in Nice in the southeast of France, and you'll see me review his beers on the channel over the next little while as well. But yeah, hopefully this is the start of French beer starting to get outside of France a little bit more, actually, because we have been getting one or two different French things up here in Scandinavia. So yeah, I am hopeful for the future, but if you get the chance to try some French beers, I highly recommend that you do. It's almost a little bit of an unwritten rule in Europe that if a country is very good at winemaking, they tend to also be very good when it comes to making craft beers as well. Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, Greece, Slovenia, Croatia as well have all been examples of that in action. So yeah, definitely try some beers from those countries if you get the chance. But yeah, for this review then, we are going to have a look at a beer from another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. We're going to go over to the east of France for this one, and I will apologise in advance for any bad French pronunciations in this video. It's been a very long time since I studied French at school. But yeah, for this review, we are going to go to a little town called Liverdun, which is close to Nancy, over in the east of France, like I said, and we're going to have a look at my first beer from Piggy Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Last Call for Lupulin Island. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this one is an Imperial Double Hazy New England IPA, whatever you want to call it, and hopefully this turns out to be another nice one. So this beer was released here in Sweden as part of the Tillfälligt temporary assortment through Systembolaget, and the release date, if I remember correctly, was the 5th of May. 2021. So yeah, certainly looking forward to trying this one. The last French beer that I reviewed for you on the channel was my very first French New England IPA. That came from Brasserie Popin, if I remember the name rightly, but they were based over closer to Paris, if I remember rightly. So I think this could well be my first beer from the Alsace-Lorraine region, if I remember rightly. But yeah, as I say, certainly looking forward to it. Hopefully it's another interesting beer. Cool to have some more French beer for you on the channel, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. This beer certainly has an interesting hop bill as well, and I'm very curious just to get this one open. But yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Piggy Brewing Company. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the French beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, not as often as I would like right enough, because as I say, French beer is very hard to get. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a little bit about Piggy Brewing Company then. So Piggy Brewing Company, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Liverdun in Grand-Est-France, basically Grand-Est-France, I think, if you translate it into English. But this is a small medieval and resort town which is very close to Nancy, over in the kind of east of France, very close to the German border, of course. That Alsace-Lorraine region has been subject of a bit of wrangling over the centuries between Germany and France. But anyway, this brewery, though, was founded back in 2016 by Romain Bach and Pierrot Fechtig. But Romain and Pierrot started homebrewing in around 2009, and they developed the recipes over the next few years before officially founding Piggy Brewing Company in 2016. But they initially brewed their beers under contract at the IFBM, which is the French Institute for Brewing and Malting, and then later they brewed a few beers at Hoppy Road Brewery in Maxeville. But in 2018, Lorenzo Gamba, who is another home brewer, joined the company along with his brother Thibaut, who is a Michelin chef, and they've also been heavily involved in things over the last few years. But the beers, the Piggy Brewing Company beers, proved to be very, very popular, and because of their success, they were able to invest in their own brewery, and so they settled in Liverdun back in 2019. But the brewery itself is equipped with a 20 hectolitre brew kit, and they've gradually expanded the fermentation capacity so that they can produce around 5,000 hectolitres of beer per year, so about 500,000 litres. But the brewery can be found in one of the old warehouses of Madeleines de Liverdun. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, probably not, but yeah, Madeleines de Liverdun, and this has a floor space of around 1,300 square metres. But apparently, they chose the name of this brewery, they chose an English name for the brewery because they said they've been greatly influenced by the English breweries and their beer styles, namely the IPA. But the idea behind using the piggy imagery is that they say that people can be sort of fat in spirit. You know, the French love their wine and their food and things like this, of course, but the idea is that people can enjoy good beer and good food, and the pig is supposed to embody a kind of jovial spirit, apparently. But yeah, as of May 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, these guys have produced around 150 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and there's a whole host of different styles in there, like wit beers, IPAs, New England's West Coasters. I think there's a few black IPAs and stuff, and there's also been a few stouts and things too. But yeah, this is certainly my first encounter with them. I'm not sure exactly what styles these guys would be best known for, but yeah, it's certainly just cool to have one of their beers and to have some more French beer here on the channel, of course. But that's all I can really tell you about Piggy Brewing Company for the moment. It was actually a little bit difficult to piece together exactly what the brewery history was, because a few of the articles seemed to kind of disagree that I read, but then I was, you know, translating French articles, of course, using Google Translate, so you know there may well be a few anomalies in there. So if you are close to this brewery, do let me know if there's any mistakes in this one in the comment section below. That's always helpful to have nice up-to-date notes. But yeah, as I say, that's all I can really tell you for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a little look at this beer itself. So as you can see, this one is another 440ml can. It's got one of my hairs stuck to it as well, but you can see the artwork on this is very, very nice there. Very cool, and you can see there is the Piggy Brewing Company symbol there. But yeah, it's also on the suitcase as well. Didn't realise that. But that is pretty cool. So, bière houblonnée à la pelle. So basically, I think that means it's hoppy beer. I don't know what à la pelle would be, to be honest. As I say, it's been far too long since I studied French at school. À conserver debout et au frais. I don't know. It is quite funny. I should try and brush up on my French a little bit, because I'm sure it would be very useful. In recent years, though, my attention has been in Swedish, obviously, since I've been living here, and Japanese, because my girlfriend is from Japan, and I want to have a little go at Spanish after that, actually. But yeah, 440ml can, this one. I paid, I think, 55 Swedish kroners for this. Normally for a Swedish beer of the same size or whatever, you would pay roughly, yeah, 50 or maybe 60 kroners for it. So this one, you know, this wasn't too bad. Normally, if you've got an imported beer, you'll pay an extra 10 kroners for it, because the import company has to make a little bit of money off that as well. But yeah, 55 Swedish kroner works out at roughly €5.50, about £5 sterling, and you know, maybe about $6.50 American, something like that. And I'll tell you something, the beer actually does feel quite dense. So yeah, curious to see what this one has in store for us. But yeah, the hops in this one apparently are Laurel, Mosaic, Equinox and Azacca, and it has barley malt, wheat malt and oats in it, so that should be quite nice. But yeah, Laurel, as we know, that's a hop I haven't had too much of. That's quite a herbal and kind of citrusy one from what I remember. Mosaic, lovely juicy tangerine oranges, we've had that a lot. Equinox got that big lovely lime character to it, and Azacca is a mix of a sort of sharper mandarin-y orange and a bit of pineapple in my experience. But yeah, all American hops, all between 12 and about 14 or 15% alpha acid. So yeah, 8% New England double IPA. This one, last call for Lupulin Island. It's certainly got an impressive hop bill. So let's get stuck into this one then. My first beer from Piggy Brewing Company. Oh, that had quite a bit of carbon dioxide in it, I think. The top of the beer just went as soon as you opened it there. So yeah, the can was like rock solid actually, so I think there was a fair wee bit of CO2 in this one. Hopefully the beer hasn't been sitting for too long. It certainly does still smell pretty fresh, but that is unfortunately one of the things you can get with imported beers sometimes. They usually sit for a couple of weeks in the warehouses of the different export and import companies, unfortunately. But yeah, let me just check that that is lined up again for you. And there we go. So let's crack on with this beer then. So before the head disappears, you can see this beer is poured with about a 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head there. That is going to fade away over the next little while though. But yeah, the beer itself is a very, very pale colour actually. So if I shine the light through this one, it is pretty damn hazy, but you can see in terms of colour on the viewfinder of the camera, it actually looks like a very rich yellow kind of mango juice colour, but to the naked eye this one is a little bit paler than that. It's almost a little bit like a kind of mango and pineapple juice colour. It's got a little bit of the kind of pineapple paleness to it. I always like comparing New England IPAs to different fruit juices because that's really what their appearance remind me of. But yeah, remember the colour of your beer is dependent on 1, the type of malts that you use, 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour of beer. A New England IPA like this will undergo a boil of like 70 to 90 minutes, something like that. But yeah, this one is one of the paler ones that I've come across over the last little while. Not the palest, but definitely one of the more pale ones. In terms of the level of haziness, this one does have a fairly impressive level of haze, and the haze of course is down to the yeast and the oat and the wheat content, and that just varies from brewery to brewery, although theoretically as you go up the alcohol scale you've got more oats and wheat, so you should get a wee bit more haziness, but not always the case, absolutely not always the case. But yeah, in terms of a New England IPA, this one certainly looks the part. Nothing very surprising about the appearance of this one, so let's take a closer look at the aroma then and see how we get on. Very, very curious about this. Ooh, that one actually, the first impression of it is that it smells really nice and light and drinkable actually. And it smells very balanced too in the malt base. Now, in my opinion, a lot of people underestimate the importance of having a nice, well-balanced malt base in these kind of more hop-forward beers. And I think that's a terrible shame, to be honest with you. But for me, with a New England IPA, you can take it in quite a few different directions. They can be sort of bready and barley malt leaning. They can be kind of more yeasty and farmhousey. They can be a bit more kind of rye leaning and a bit grainy, wheaty and bitey, oaty and creamy, or they can have a little bit more of a kind of brown sugary element to them. But quite often they will display a few of these characteristics. But for me, this one actually smells, it's got a good bit of wheaty bitiness to it. You get more of that as you smell it. So yeah, it does have a wee bit of a wheaty bitey pungency to it. But at the same time, you get a lovely light white bready quality, and you can also smell some of the smoothness and the sweetness out of the oats in this one as you first go into it. But that's a very kind of basic look at the malty side of the beer. That's just my first impression. So let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. So yeah, straight away with this beer, as I say, you get a lovely sort of fluffy white bready character coming out of this one. That forms the backbone of the beer. As I say, when you smell this one for a little bit longer, you start to get a wee bit of the sweetness of the oats coming out of this one, and then at the very back of the nose you have that sort of wheaty bitiness there. And I think as your nose adjusts to it, the sort of potency of the wheat just drops a little bit. So yeah, there's a little touch of a kind of Werther's Original kind of butter candy type thing to this one. You do get a little bit of that in this beer. You can smell a little bit with this one as well, just at the age it is, that you can smell the wheat and the oats just kind of thickening out a little bit. You can smell that this one is not in its absolute prime freshness, if you like. You can just smell the oats and the wheat thickening out a little bit, and you'll often find that with these New England beers. And I think this is one thing that Systembolaget have to work on, and the import companies, they need to get these beers, and they need to be a little bit more flexible in getting these beers out there for the Tillfällig temporary assortiments and just get them out there when they can. But of course, that's the other thing is Systembolaget is nationwide. You can't be releasing beers on different days in different regions. That would just, I think, they don't like that, we should say. But yeah, the malt base in this one, I'd say this is a really bready, barley malt leaning New England IPA, but it does have those other elements in there. A wee bit of that kind of butter candy, brown sugary sweetness, as I say, which you will tend to get when it's an 8%er you're talking about, not so much in the kind of 6.5%ers and below, the single IPAs, and then the session IPAs below that as well. But yeah, lovely bready backbone to it, a bit of wheaty bitiness, and some nice oaty smoothness coming out of this one, the further that you go into it. So the malty side of things comes across very, very nicely in this one, in my experience, or in my opinion, I should say. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then. So yeah, hoppy side of the beer is quite nice. Remember, these New England IPAs rely on later addition hops, because if you add the hops early on during the boil, that's when you get most bitterness, and you have a gradual trade-off over the course of the wort boil in favour of, you know, flavour and aroma, of course. But yeah, this one comes across really nicely. There's a wee touch of earthiness out of this one, which will come from the mosaic. You've got a nice big floral aromatic component to this one. I wouldn't say it's too bitey and spicy and things like that. It does have a nice wee bit of smoothness to it, and you've also got a good little bit of you've got a nice little bit of a kind of grassy, a little bit of a zesty grassy kind of thing to this beer as well. So it looks it does look very, very nice, come to think of it. So yeah, it gets the green component of this one gets a thumbs up for me. It builds a good bridge with the bitiness at the back of the nose, so a wee bit of a floral aromaticity to it and some lighter kind of grassy elements. So yeah, I really appreciate how this one goes about its business. Absolutely. Yeah, on the fruity side of things, then I think we've covered everything else. But on the fruity side of things, it is kind of what you would expect. And one thing I am noticing about this beer is you do get a wee bit more of a citrusy, zesty note out of it. This beer is actually quite well balanced between the citrusy side of things and then the tropical notes at the back. But it really does lean a little bit more towards the tropical side of things. Towards the citrusy side of things rather than anything else. But I'm getting a wee bit more herbal quality out of this one from the laurel as well, and probably that stands out to me because I haven't had laurel too often. But yeah, for me, I do get a wee bit of a sharper kind of citrusy note out of this one. There's maybe a wee bit of a pungenty passion fruit in there and a bit of soft pineapple and things. But as I say, to me, the more that I smell of this beer, while there is a tropical element, I think the citrusy notes start to dominate. So you've got a lovely juicy kind of tangerine note from the mosaic, but you've also got those sharper mandarin-y elements from the Azaka coming out in this one, and the pineapple, of course, will be coming from the Osaka, the Azaka. But so yeah, you can. I think the Equinox sits. It kind of takes a bit of a back seat. Equinox usually gives you a nice oily, limey note, and I don't get too much of that in this beer. There is a little bit of it at the front of the nose behind the grassiness, but yeah, this beer, as I say, it's quite sort of lemony leaning, and I think that's the laurel that's going to give you that. Yeah, juicy tangerines, a little bit of a sharper mandarin, and then some limey, I say a wee bit of a limey note from the Equinox. So yeah, this is quite a citrusy leaning New England in my experience. Yeah, take a bit of time and enjoy the aroma of that. And as I say, it gets a wee bit more herbal from the laurel, I think, the more that you drink of it. But yeah, let's just stick the rest of it in before we taste it, because then I don't need to worry about relining up the can again later on. There we go. So let's get stuck into this one then. So this beer is the last call for Lupulin Island, an 8% New England hazy, double imperial, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Piggy Brewing Company in Liverdun, in Grand-Est-France, over in the east of France. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skull, and I think, do they say santé in French? Cheers. I very nearly said salut there, but I think salut is hello, if I remember rightly. But yeah, this is a really nice, it's a very drinkable New England Double, this one. What you'll find with this beer is that it's actually quite light and kind of crisp in its mouthfeel. But yeah, this is another solid French beer. Absolutely. So, yeah, where to start with this one then? As I say, it's very light and very drinkable, and it kind of reflects the aroma quite well, actually. It shows what you would expect from the aroma in the beer quite nicely. So, yeah, let's get started with this one then. Straight away, across the middle third of your palate, you can feel that nice barley malty, white bready base to the beer, which I really like. Yeah, it sort of builds up and thickens up a wee bit the more that you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, this is a very nice, just light, drinkable beer. Absolutely. So for 8%, it is actually kind of crazily drinkable, to be honest. So yeah, soft white bready notes across the middle of your palate there. There is a wee bit of a bread crusty element. If we're talking about that middle third of your palate, soft white bready element in there. But as you move towards the front of that middle third of your tongue and the back of the middle third of your tongue, you get a wee bit of a bread crusty element. But coming out on top of that, the further you go into the aftertaste, you get almost like a little circle in that middle part of your tongue, and you get a smoother kind of oaty character to the beer. So yeah, you can feel a little bit of the oaty sweetness coming out of this one, but this beer is not so thick and oaty in a sense. It's just a little bit more smooth. This beer really takes the kind of smooth and quite light approach compared to other ones we've had. But yeah, it's as I say, very nice. Yeah, in the very centre of your palate, again, you get a wee bit of that sort of Werther's Original butter candy type flavour with this one. That, of course, is the alcohol flavour in the beer, definitely. You just get a wee bit of sweeter brown sugars in the middle of your palate. As you move further out from that, it's a little bit more. You do get one or two little slight biscuity elements. And in honesty, I wouldn't be surprised if there is a wee tiny touch of some sort of Pilsner malt or lager malt in this beer, because as you go towards the back of that middle third of your palate, there are just a few crisper elements coming out of this one. So yeah, that's an interesting point about this beer for sure as well. So, yeah, I can certainly appreciate how this one, how this beer goes together. So, yeah, I can certainly enjoy this one. This beer ticks quite a few boxes for me. I really like this one, and as I say, this is one of the things that kind of shows you it's a shame that French beer doesn't get out there all that much, because they've got some good things there. Then this is one of the kind of gifts and the curses of craft beer. Wherever you go, you can try some things that you've not tried before, but there's good stuff out there that people should be able to get a lot more easily. It's gift and a curse, catch-22. But yeah, middle third of your palate with this one. It's quite straight shooting, this beer, on the malty side of things, but it works really nicely. So on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a wee bit of a bready build up, a bit of a bread crusty thing there. Then, pardon me, on the back third of your palate, at the very back, you can feel a little bit of the kind of smooth but still slightly bitey, wheaty element there. And sitting on top of that wheaty element, you get a little bit more of a kind of airy, yeasty component to the beer. So when you start at the back of your palate, the beer is kind of like this. It's a little bit taller like that, and as you move further forward, you can feel it kind of gradually condenses down, and then as you go into the middle third of your palate, the flavours are a little bit more kind of just squashed together, if you like. So that middle third of your palate is a little bit kind of not quite as airy, if you like, kind of thicker and airy as the back third of the palate is. So that's quite interesting about this one, but I think that summarises the malty side of this beer quite well, to be honest with you. Let's move on to the hops, the green component. But yeah, In the back corners of the palate then, there is a little touch of a slight earthiness to this one. That'll be the Mosaic, but and maybe the Laurel. But as you move further forward from that, you start to get a wee touch of a herbal quality, and I think that will mainly be the Laurel. And as we reach the kind of front corners of the palate, it gets a little bit more kind of floral and aromatic. So it's got a nice bright floral aromaticity to it. There's a little bit of a kind of spiciness in there, but not too much. As I say, all of these hops are American, and they're between 12 and 15% alpha acid. But as you go round the front curve of the palate, it's got a little bit of a kind of lighter, grassy sort of thing as well. So I really like how that goes together. So yeah, it works. It does work very, very nicely. So yeah, that the green component for me it's quite interesting, this one. It's got quite a diverse green component to it, and it's not too punchy and bitey or anything like that. And that kind of suits the slightly more bready aspect that this beer has. As I say, the middle of your palate is like a soft, white, fresh French bread. So yeah, I like it. But let's focus on the front third of your palate then. That's where you get all the fruity elements coming out of the beer. So, yeah, on that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, then again you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up. There's a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty thing in there. And then the base of that front third of your palate, as I say, the base of that front third of your palate is a nice smooth white bready note in there again. So yeah, and on top of that, as I always say, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. And as I said earlier with the aroma, this beer is a little bit lower on the tropical fruit side of things, but it leans a wee bit more towards a kind of citrusy vibe actually, for sure. So yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a kind of, you do get a wee tiny touch of a kind of more lemony, citrusy sort of thing. And as you move further forward, it becomes a little bit pineapple-y. So yeah, the back half of your front third of the palate there is a little bit more pineapple-y. But as you move into the front half of that, front third of your tongue, it's distinctly more, orangey. You get some of the lighter tangerine notes from the Azaka in there. You get a bit of a sharper mandarin, and then just behind the kind of front, tip of the tongue, you've got a nice kind of limey note from the Equinaut as well. So I really like how that side of things goes together. This is definitely a kind of light bready and kind of citrusy leaning New England double IPA. It's stupidly drinkable as well for an 8%er. It's kind of crazy in that sense. But yeah, this is quite different to a few of the other ones I've had. There's so many New England IPAs out there these days. It is nice to have something that is just, a slight change of pace, and this one's certainly given me that. So yeah, thumbs up to Piggy Brewing Company for this. A solid beer. But let's round off the review then with the mouthfeel. I would say overall that this beer is kind of at the bottom end of mid-bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It is generally speaking a very smooth beer, but at the same time, it just comes across as very light and drinkable. In terms of IBUs, this is quite standard for the style. Pardon me. Yeah, in terms of IBUs, this one is a nice, it is quite a nice sort of 20-ish, maybe 25 IBUs. So yeah, that's fairly standard for this, for the style actually. 25 IBUs I would think. But yeah, the malt base, like I say, is quite nice and light, crisp in a sense too. Yeah, there's a wee touch of sweetness in there. Then you've got a nice kind of smooth but then slightly juicy fruity note to the beer, and it really leans towards that kind of citrusy element. So yeah, I really like how this one goes about its business. So I'd be curious to try a few more beers from Piggy Brewing Company. If they've got a West Coaster and a black IPA and like a stout or something, that could be really interesting. But they've done this one really solidly. The things that linger into the aftertaste with this beer, of course, are a little bit the herbal and the earthy character from the Laurel and the nice kind of citrusy elements. So yeah, take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this beer, but the flavour of this beer, and yeah, it's a really nice, easy drinker, stupidly drinkable for an 8%er, I should say. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this review then. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Piggy Brewing Company. Let me know some other French breweries I should check out as well. But in the meantime, this one was the last call to Lupulin Island, an 8% Imperial Double New England Hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Piggy Brewing Company in Liverdun, Grand-Est-France, close to Nancy, over in the east of France. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you guys soon. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and santé. See you in the next review. Oh, doesn't want to go off.